Do it live. Let's see here. All right, here we go.
It's alive.
Let's see here. I'm just checking to make sure we are live. I think we are, though. And
I just got a notification. It says you're live.
We are live
on the YouTube.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I am here with my friend of actually many years now. We've known each other for a while. I got to say, I've always looked up to Dave. You've been a person that who has you've been in the field of mindset and in a lot of different ways that that I think you've really found something, and you kind of worked with it. I've read your book, Becoming the Superhuman You, and of course I've seen you do a lot of breaking of things and tearing up of things and feats of superhuman strength and skill. And so today we're going to be just kind of hanging out. Hey, Punja, how's it going? Welcome, everybody. If you have questions for Dave or myself today, just feel free. We're going to be hanging out for about an hour and just going live today. Dave is Dave's, you know what, Dave, could you give your background? Because I would probably not even be able to do it justice. I would highlight certain parts, but yeah, just kind of give people just kind of a background.
I certainly can, and I'm happy to do that. But before I do that, I want to ask you, are the comments popping up on YouTube? Because I'm looking at a Zoom link right now. Is that where the comments are, is on YouTube?
Yeah, it's going to be on YouTube.
Okay.
So
all right. So I've opened the live now. So where are the comments?
So this is going to be below.
Watching. Yeah.
Yeah. So far we just have one. We have Pooja saying hello and
okay. Hello, Pooja. All right. Well, I'll open that and kind of shove it off to the side of the thing there. And if someone comments, then I'll know it. Yeah. So quick background on me. First, the earth cooled, and then there were the dinosaurs. Right. No, I have been involved in various different things related to health, fitness, strength, mental power for many, many, many years. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be the Hulk. I got involved in lifting weights in the early 2000s, coming up on, well, it's actually been about 21 years since I got involved with swinging kettlebells and stuff. It's this year, I realized the other day, 2023, I went through kettlebell instructor certification training in 2003. So 20 years ago is when I started teaching people how to do kettlebells. And that was to lift kettlebells and get stronger with kettlebells and stuff. And that was an integral part of my journey because it was a big paradigm shift for me. And I've done many things. I was a professional musician for a while. I was a professional wrestler for a short period of time.
What? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, on the very low level, like about twice a year, you could turn the TV on the local channel back when it was, it wasn't all cable stuff. And you could see me at the Nashville Fairgrounds just getting hit in the head with a chair and rolled out of the ring or something.
Oh my God.
I was not well known. I was not popular. I was what we called a jobber. Pin me and pay me, right? And so did that, was a musician in the early 2000s, got involved in the kettlebell stuff, had been an exercise guy for years, had done martial arts and qigong and breath work like that for years, meditation for years, all kind of came to a head, got involved in the kettlebell stuff. And like that flipped a switch for me. I was also a massage therapist at the time when this happened, got involved in the kettlebell stuff and decided this is what I'm going to do. And I did. And between 2003 up until 2016, that was most of the time the peak of what I was doing professionally and personally. Right, there was fluctuations in there. In about 2007, 2006, somewhere around in there, I met a guy named Dennis Rogers, who is in the world of professional performing strongmen considered the grand master. He's a small guy, about 5'8". At the time, he's about 160 pounds or so. And I watched him bend a crescent wrench like an adjustable wrench. And I'm like, that didn't compute. And so then I threw myself into that, right? And I'm at the time I had a website where I would interview people, and this is how far back this goes. I would interview people, and then I would burn a physical CD and mail that out to people that were on my list, right? So it was like podcasts before there were podcasts. And a good friend of mine, the late great mighty Bud Jeffries, we're coming up on a year since he tragically and unexpectedly passed away, introduced me to Dennis Rogers. I had interviewed Bud for the show, and Dennis was a mentor to Bud. He's like, you really got to get Dennis on the show. Connected up with him, saw him bend this wrench. I'm like, wait a minute, wait. This is a whole different way of looking at stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so he sent me some DVDs of him teaching stuff and doing stuff. He's like, if you ever want to learn any of this, let me know. I did the interview with him, immediately became a student. Fast forward to 2020, he decided to close his hands and retire from teaching and from performing anymore, and pass the mantle of Old Time Strongman University on to me. So that's a huge honor and an amazing thing, right? So I've for the last several years up until the pandemic, I was a performing strongman and keynote speaker, and that was my main thing that I did.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was 2013. Yeah, 2013 was when my mother passed away. And I had been kind of goofing around with what's called cold water dowsing, where you take a couple of buckets of cold water, you pour it over your head, stand out in the cold, and you think you're all, awesome and everything. And goofed around with that and had fun with it. And then right after she passed away, she passed early December. It was Christmas. I was at my in-laws' house, and I'm dealing with the first Christmas without my mother being alive, right? I can't call my mom and tell her Merry Christmas. And that's, if you've never been there, then call your mom. If you have been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm up late watching television, and there's this thing on about superhuman something or other. And I'm like, okay, I want to check this out. And it was Wim Hof.
Yeah.
And on there, it's footage of him swimming under ice and doing all the stuff that Wim Hof does. And that again, I was like, wait a minute, wait, that doesn't make any sense, right? So it was exactly the same as seeing Dennis Rogers. So I'm like, wait a minute, because I'm like, oh, I'm in the cold, right?
Yeah.
No. And so I ordered the book that he wrote with Justin Rosales.
Yeah.
Which, as an former English professor, if you've read that had to be painful.
I didn't make it all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah. When and Wim's English is better than, well, I'm gonna leave that one alone, right? So we'll just the book was valuable but not well written. We'll leave it at that. Right.
I like that's the nice way to say it. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of value in it. And that's and if there's anything that I've picked up lots of things over the years, but one thing that I'm very cognizant of is that no matter how something's being delivered or presented, if I can find something valuable in it, I can take that and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
That's the skill. Yeah.
And so all of that's going on. 2016 rolls around. I go to California to train with Wim face to face, and I meet you. That's right. And I meet several other amazing human beings at this first U.S. Wim Hof thing that we did, and started integrating that into. Well, I'd been practicing the method for several years then, but right, and I'd been practicing breath work for even longer than that. But it all sort of codified and got together. And then we spent a week together in Colorado that year, and we've maintained a great relationship. Done several workshops ever since then. I was doing the performing strongman speaking thing. Pandemic hit, and the world said, we're not hiring anymore. Stay home. And so literally my entire year got canceled, and I had already been making steps toward moving to online coaching regarding mindset and the mental training, taking what I learned from strongman and from cold exposure and breath work and all of these things, and packaging it up into a way for goal achievement and personal development. So I dove into that. Sidebar on that, and I talked about this at the event in Colorado. My wife and I were having a great deal of difficulty. We wanted to have a child, and we were unable to. And ultimately, through a lot of good positive vibes and trips to the fertility clinic and modern science magic, we have a son now. And after he was born, and like that was a big thing that shook me, right? Because like here he is, and like when we got that first positive pregnancy test back, I was like, oh my God, this is actually going to happen. Because up till then, and it was like every month it was almost like somebody died. There was this grief that went along with it, because it's like maybe this month we'll be pregnant, and then she wasn't, and so we get to that point, and like when we had that positive pregnancy test, it just slapped me in the face with like the overwhelming joy and enormity of it all. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is real. This is going to happen. And I started kind of freaking out a little bit. And I'm like, okay, now I have this responsibility that I hadn't really considered before, to help him be a better person than I am, which means I've got to be a better man than I am now, right? I've got to start acting like the guy that I want him to have as a hero. And so that is where I am now professionally with everything that I'm doing, is helping dads to look inside themselves, look at whatever generational cycles of, is it okay to say bullshit on here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's just me. It's just me and we're all good. Yeah.
Well, it's like sometimes you don't want to say
right,
fucking
right. I appreciate that.
right?
Want to hang out, man.
So it's like we all have these generational cycles and some of it is awesome stuff, and some of it is just utter bullshit that we inherited, that we've carried around, and it's almost like, well, that's just the way I am. I've always been that way. There's the story about the newlywed couple, and the wife's cooking the ham or whatever it is, and she cuts the end of the ham off before she puts it in. And it's like the juiciest, nicest piece of the ham, and she cuts it off, tosses it, gives it to the dog or whatever before she cooks the ham. And the husband's like, why do you do that? And she's like, well, that's how my mom always did it. I never really thought about it. Let's go ask mom. So they go in and they ask a mom, and she's like, well, that's how my mom taught me. So I never really thought about it. Let's go ask grandma. So they go to the wife's grandma and say, why do you cut the end of the ham off before you put it in? And she says, because my pan was too small to hold a full size ham.
But I think that's a perfect example of how generationally things get passed down. And ultimately, I know a lot of the things, whenever I became a father, and it's like, okay, I have to grow up. I think that's something that is a thing, right? And for fathers that are out there, hey, I see a lot of comments, guys. We'll get to that in just a minute. I'm so glad. Hey, Papa Geek, Skal. We're going to try to speak only in Fahrenheit, Papa Geek. I'm sorry, Dave. My Celsius Fahrenheit conversion is terrible, and it's the subject of much chagrin across the world. Yeah, I'm sorry.
My Celsius to Fahrenheit is not good. My pounds to kilos is spot on though. So
that's a great point. Yeah, I can pretty much, I can relate a little bit there, as long as it's 45 pounds to, actually, never mind. Yours is going to be better. But the whole point of okay, now I'm a parent, now I'm a father. And I think society also has a lot of voices now, that there's a lot of pressure, okay, when it comes to parenting and how you parent. And so you kind of have to figure a lot of things out, and and you're like, well, okay, I think there's always the thing is like, I'm going to be different from my father in these regards.
Right.
But the way we're programmed is literally our experiences shape who we become.
Yep.
And it's oftentimes it's difficult to see those things, because we're just like, well, that's just how things are, right? And so I can see it being really helpful to have somebody to, and I will say, if someone's going to call me out on my bullshit, and Dave has done this before, it's going to be Dave Whitley, because you're kind of a matter of fact kind of guy, and someone who I could say, okay, you're right, Dave, damn it. Shut up, Dave, but you're right, Dave, So
but can I qualify that though with saying that I do the utmost that I can, in like the very best that I can, to express things like that with kindness and compassion too, though? Like I never just look at somebody and say, "You're an idiot." I just
Yeah,
don't do that, right?
No,
I might approach it like, "Well, have you considered that maybe you're not being very smart right now?"
right. No, that's the thing, actually, you know, that you learn. And the thing is, you've had a long enough, like as a person now, I've been doing coaching and things professionally since we finished our training. That was the beginning for me back in 2016. And you do learn, you know, that there are certain ways to coach a person that are more effective and less abrasive than others.
Yep.
But when it comes to your, I guess, method, or when it comes to your way of looking at it, how did you come up with, because, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm going to call myself out on my bullshit, and I tried to, but how do you see past your own bullshit? And then how do you help a person? You know, do you have any method of helping a person to kind of organize, or how do you do that? Can you maybe just explain kind of what you do when you coach dads?
Sure. Well, first of all, if anybody wants to know more about it, I've got a workshop that's coming up next week, and you can go to advancingmanproject.com and register for the workshop. It's going to be, I'm going to deep dive into a lot of stuff that we're talking about right now. It's going to go for a couple of hours at least. But the genesis of that, we go back to 2020 again. My dad passed away, and I was able to spend an afternoon with him that we had the conversations that left nothing unsaid between between a father and his grown son. And there were some painful things we talked about. And we both knew that he only had a few days left at the time. Like we knew that this was probably going to be the last time that we would be able to have a conversation, if not the last time that I saw him, because like a couple days later, he kind of went to sleep. And then a couple days after that, he was gone. Right. And we talked about a lot of different stuff, but in that last conversation that we had, there were two things that have influenced what I'm doing now. The first one was, and he asked me to promise him both these things. The first thing was he asked me to promise and make sure that my son, who was 18, 19 months old at the time, knew who he was and knew what he was about, and just knew him, right? I promised my, and I'm like, of course. And then my dad, he says, the other thing that I want you to promise is that I want you to raise the bar on the standard that was set for you for being a father. And he literally said, I want you to do better than I did. And I'm talking to him about how well he did. And he's like, I know what I did well. I know where I messed up too. I want you to do better than me with him. And so I promised him that. And so it's interesting to me that now here I am talking about breaking these generational cycles and all this bullshit that we inherit from our parents. But in a very real sense, this is my dad's work that I'm carrying on. So there's good and bad to everybody, right? And so I'm very grateful that I was able to resolve anything that might have been left unresolved.
Not everybody gets that chance.
I have a biological brother that didn't get that chance. Like, he's been estranged for years. Like I literally haven't talked to him since my mother died.
Oh, well, my God.
One time since then. It was in 2015. But you know, that's on him. This guy, yeah. So that's a whole different story, right? Don't know what that's about, but there you go. So keeping that promise is vitally important to me, obviously. And the way that I approach it, like all the personal development stuff that I've done, all the research into like old authors, because like the golden age of mental science in the early 1900s is where I'm drawn. Interestingly, it's like that age of strength and that age of thinking appeals very deeply to me, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And there's a book that I'm sure most people who are watching and listening may have heard of called The Science of Getting Rich. And it was written by a guy named Wallace Wattles.
Okay.
It looks like this. It's public domain. It's on the internet for free. There's recorded versions of it on YouTube. Awesome book. It was actually the inspiration for the movie The Secret from like 15 years ago. Okay. Yeah. If you watch that movie, there's this book that gets passed and they don't ever say what it is, but that's what it was. And I found that out through being coached by Bob Proctor, who was in the movie, and he teaches. Yeah. So in there, there's a chapter called The Advancing Man. And I had recently revisited this book. And one of the things they talk about in there, and this is applicable no matter whether you're trying to earn money or not, this is like a universal principle, right? That life's purpose is to expand, and that evolution happens both literally, like physically, and also and from a spiritual standpoint. Evolution happens when we grow too big for our current space, right? And so we have to evolve into the next space. And that's also why species dies, because they don't keep up, right? So as we evolve, but he talks about this. He talks about something called the impression of increase, or the law of increase. And the advancing man is one who expresses this law of increase. And what the law of increase means, put simply, I mean, there's layers to it, but put as simply as possible. And he's talking about this from a commercial perspective in there, like,
Okay.
if you pay me money, whatever I give to you must exceed the cash value that you gave me in use value for you, right? Now,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it needs to be
right.
Yeah.
And so like when we went to Colorado and
Yeah.
we did that, there was a monetary investment in that.
Right.
It either meant more to us for our own practice, or like you've done, turn around and you've turned that field into your full-time job. And so the investment that you made then, big picture, was quite small.
Yeah, in comparison, right?
In comparison. So that is the financial variant of the impression of increase. I took it upon myself to like put that into my own internal code of operations, which is something I talk about in the workshop. We have this internal code that guides us, right? It's our subconscious stuff, right? It's the stuff that has us. You do something and you don't know why you did it. You may not have even wanted to do it, but you did it. You're like, why did I do that? I don't know, but I did, right? Or it's the thing that when we start talking to our kids and all of a sudden you can literally hear your parent's voice speaking to your child, right? That's why we call them generational cycles, right? So Wallace talks about the advancing man and the impression of increase. And so I thought, how do I, like, there's so much to this. So like how to be there for my kid. And I'm like, what if the final test of everything that I do is this? I'm going to commit that as much as possible as I can as a human being, with every single interaction that I have with my son, I'm going to find a way to leave him better off than he was before that interaction. And that's incredibly simple, and it's incredibly big too, right? Because there are days
as a father. As a father, I've got to say, I don't know if I always do that, and I think it's really, that's the goal, right? That's the goal. But then you don't even know. Like I know there's a lot of times when my goal is saying, okay, this behavior that you've done is not going to work as you grow older. It's not a good behavior, and then I am speaking currently to a 7-year-old. And so and then he just kind of wanders off as I'm trying to explain that to him. I'm like, listen, and it's those times whenever it's like, how do I, as a father, so we adopted at the age of 2, and as each age goes by, you feel like you've mastered the art of parenting, and then they grow, and it's like what you're talking about, so now is a total different species almost, right? And so now, how do I communicate to this child as he's growing, as I'm trying to give him a good example, because I know my example is actually more of what he's picking up than even the words that I'm saying. It's difficult. I can see that being, they always talk about there's no manual to being a parent.
Right.
And it is a shame. It really is a shame, because I think if unless a person is just completely, I don't know, I would say naive, I would assume we all have doubts on how well we're doing as a parent. If a person's like, oh, I'm a perfect parent. I every move I make, is
Yeah.
ideal. I don't see how a person can be honest with themselves and say that.
Well, you're not
Um,
human. You're not human if that's who you are. You're some sort of AI representation of humanity, and that doesn't work either, right? I mean,
yeah,
we all know anyone has kids or has had like interactions with other humans. We know that do as I say, not as I do, does not, has not, and never will work as
right.
a method to get people to do things, right? Especially little kids. So what we have to realize, like you said, there's no instruction manual, and that's true. There's no instruction
Yeah,
manual. All we have is our own experience and the stereotypes that we are bombarded with from society, right? We're basically force fed all of these different stereotypes of dads, right? You have your absent provider, the guy who like, I go to
yeah.
work and I bring home money and I feed you and you have clothes and then I go to bed, and when you graduate, you're a man now and I don't even know you, right? And then you have
Right.
like your heavy-handed disciplinarian, right? Like, oh my God, wait till your father gets home. And they're terrified of their dad because he's, whatever. Have you ever seen the movie Fences, like with Denzel Washington, when he's talking about, I ain't got to like you. I gave you life. I'm your father. I don't have to like you. I have a responsibility to raise you, but I don't have to like you. I'm like, what an asshole, right? And then, of course, and then you have like your bumbling idiots, like the pinnacle, the apex predator of that is Homer Simpson, right? And so
Yeah,
these are the examples we're handed, that and
yeah.
whatever happened in our house, right? And, I have a son, but like if you see stereotypes in movies, TV, that kind of stuff of the father of a teenage daughter, he's threatening to shoot the daughter's boyfriend when he comes to pick her up for the date, right?
That
And, and
and what's interesting is social media kind of has increased that, I think, even more, because I remember there was always like, ha ha, you're gonna eat the dad, huh? Better watch out. Whenever I was dating, that was before the internet really was a thing.
right,
Um, and actually, this is good. Papa Geek is asking, he'd love us if we could dig into male archetypes. But I think, yeah, we're already kind of getting into the
yeah,
archetypes that we're given with fatherhood, at least.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, the whole, yeah, and that's sort of, it's such a kind of a weird thing. The whole, I'm going to shoot any suitor that comes from my daughter,
Right.
and obviously it's the whole like, hey, I remember being a horn dog and I'm trying to protect her, in that respect. But it's like, you do want your daughter to be happy and have
Well, yeah. Well,
spouse, whatever.
here's my take on it, right? If she's 16, 17, dating age, whatever that is, uh, and you're concerned that she's going to go out with some guy and she's going to have consensual physical relations with this guy, that's something that those are values that you have to instill when they're, babies before they can walk, right? Because by the time they're basically a young adult at that point, right?
Well, and at that point, what kind of man is she picking out? And
Mhm.
and that's the input you need to do early on, right?
Well,
And
and if we look at the idea that very often we are drawn to people who are like our parents, like our opposite sex parents. If she's drawn
yeah,
to a guy who's going to be mean to her or you know take advantage of her or sexually assault her or whatever, what's it say about you? You
that's a good
know,
point. That's a good point.
so ultimately I look at those stereotypes and I think, do I want my son to grow up to parent his children that way? And I don't. So I'm not going to do any of that stuff, right? So the sort of the litmus test for it is, well, first of all, you don't have to be any of those things, right? You don't have to be any of those stereotypes, and you don't have to be who your parents were. There's no instruction manual, but um, there's actions that you can take. There's things that you can decide, and my experience is that the better man I become, the
Yeah,
better off it's going to be, because do as I say, not as I do doesn't work. And then there's the other cliche that floats around, and cliches get written off because they're cliches, but they're cliches because they make sense, right?
this is true.
And
They've been used a long time because
well,
of
and the
yeah.
cliche here is the kids are always watching, and they
It's
are.
true.
They
It's
absolutely are, because of the way we learn from birth up until about age 7 or so, because of the way our brains receive, interpret, and store and categorize and catalog information. Those formative years, we call them the sponge years, right? It's like if someone grows up in a family where they speak 3 languages, by the time they're 7 years old, they're conversational in all 3 of those languages, if those languages are spoken in the home. Now, if you were, or me at our age right now, said, you know what, I'm going to go learn Russian and Chinese, how long would that take? Like,
it may never happen, Dave.
even if we moved to those countries and lived there, how long would it take us to get as fluently conversational as a 5-year-old who grows up with that being spoken in their house?
Prevention and education are so much more effective early on. Right.
And part of that has to do with the brain being in theta wave, and stuff just goes into subconscious mind. There's no filter to block it out, which is awesome for learning, but it's also terrifying if you think about like well, my friend Joe Vitale, who was also in the movie The Secret, friend, mentor. When my son was born, he's one of the people who I will ask questions of a metaphysical nature to. And we brought my son home, and he's just a few days old, and we were fans of the show The Walking Dead. Still am. They've kind of jumped the shark on it. But
show, I mean, how many zombies can there be?
Right.
Eventually, they got to shoot them all. I mean, it's just like there's only so many, right? I'm teasing. Well, anyway,
and not only that, but how long can they keep crawling? And where the hell did they find gasoline? But anyway, we had The Walking Dead on, and the boy was asleep in the bassinet right there, and I'm like, something feels off about this. So I text Joe and I said, so like when that stuff's just kind of floating around in the air around children, what happens? What effect can it have? He texted back 3 words that like altered the course. He said, he'll absorb it. I'm like, okay, so do I want he can't even roll over on his own yet, son, absorbing The Walking Dead? No, I don't. So we started as a family looking at things very, very critically. What do we want to expose him to at what point, right? And like, so still to this day, there's only a couple of TV shows that he watches. Like, if you're a parent and you have a kid who's like 5 or younger, and you're not watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood with your kid, you are missing an opportunity, because that show is amazing.
They make some of these shows now that are, I feel like they understand that they need to make the show so that it's good enough for the parent to watch with the child too. Mm-hmm. Some of them are the best ones. Some of them are just mindless nonsense.
Yes.
But there are some of them that are like, and sometimes they'll slip in a joke or a reference that the child won't really get, but the adult gets, and it's like, oh, that's pretty clever,
Yeah. There's, and I know I'm going off topic here, but there's a show called Dinosaur Train that my son loves. It's like somebody sat around and says, what do kids love? Dinosaurs and trains. Let's put it together.
There you go.
Yeah. So without going into all the details about that, there's this one episode where there's this starfish and this crab and their friends, and the starfish's name is Stella. And whatever happens, she gets washed out, she disappears, and the crab is like, Stella! And I'm like, that was clever, right?
And there's no way the child could get the reference. No. But the thing is, it's so good to absorb material with your child.
Yes.
Now, I will say later on, there's so many challenges that our parents didn't face, and this is something that I think is a challenge. As I'd love to know how you approach, or get an idea of how you approach it with your clients, because one of the issues in the 70s, actually, even back in the 70s, there was this author that said we're living in a tech apocalypse, because things they're advancing so fast that humans just can't keep up. Mm-hmm. And if you think about most of human history, like our lives and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives, our great-grandfather and mother, they were pretty much the same. Like, fashion didn't change. We didn't have major technological advances like we have now. Media, was not, it was the thing. It wasn't like you had these major changes. Yes, maybe there's a lot of more, pillaging and raping and like wars and things like that, but you would not have these major cultural shifts that we have now. I mean, I was, a college professor for many years. I'm still recovering, but it's, I remember I've had, a lot of my students, I told they were just mystified when I said that I remember back before Facebook, and they're like what? Like my 7-year-old son, I forget, we were watching something. It was like there was Egyptians, right? And he's like, how did they watch videos? And I'm like, oh my God, it's
Right.
like humanity for the longest time, your life wasn't as different from your child's life. Now, I think an added challenge is the fact that I know very well that my son, I can't even imagine the things. Like I occasionally I'm like, I'll be like, yeah, you probably won't have to go to the gas station when you're my age. So
Right.
we'll figure out a way to make it like Fusion or whatever, and Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future or whatever, but how do you, what are some thoughts that you have on that, I guess?
Um, well, the first thing that
I didn't mean to, I guess I just threw a bunch of things together and like,
yeah,
threw
yeah,
it at you, but
yeah, you did. And I'm like processing which one of these things do I answer first. The first thing is understand that however we approach things is how they are going to approach things.
Yeah.
Because they model what we do way more than what we tell them to do as a way of like learning it and receiving it, right? So it's important, I think, that and this isn't really, doesn't go along with the technological stuff that you're talking about directly, but it does indirectly. It's like what are the values that I want him to instill? Like before he was born, I sat down and wrote out a list of things that I wanted to instill in him.
Oh my God,
and like it's right over here, right? The final list. I dropped it. Like the final list, I've got it on this index card, and we have like self-reliance, a love of music, kindness, physical strength and health, belief in himself, encouragement, humor, openly loving, openly expressing how he feels, using his imagination, curiosity, creativity, like all of these things. And that's the finalized list. But when I started doing that, like the first time I went through, I looked at it and I'm like, there's about half the stuff on here that I'm falling short on. And so if he's going to model me and I want him to receive this, internal code that we're developing here, I have to get my shit together. And
and that's the thing, man, being a parent, it's the ultimate. You got to grow up now. You've got to embody the person that you're wanting this other person to look up to.
Yeah. Yep. And so I think that laying that kind of foundation with kids my son's age and your son's age is more important now, and it's always been vitally important, but I think it's more important now in this technological quickening that we experience, right? Because we as humans by nature complain. We as humans by nature look for the worst possible outcome. And I realized not that long ago, like within the past year or so, I'm like, why is everybody complaining about everything all the time? And then I realized it's an evolutionary byproduct that's hardwired into our DNA that got us to where we are, because we don't have claws, we don't have teeth, we have our minds. And so when we get up and we leave the cave, we have to constantly be on the lookout for danger, because a broken femur 5,000 years ago was a death sentence. Right. And so we have to be on the lookout for that. And so we are hardwired to look for things that suck, for things that we don't like, for things that we don't want. But now we live a relatively safe environment. Very few of us compared in percentage of population compared to thousands of years ago are ever in any real mortal danger.
Yeah.
So so now I'm working on a project and my computer crashes and I lose everything. I'm driving somewhere and I'm late and I get cut off or stuck in traffic. Physiologically, on a cellular level, and we've talked about this at workshops before, right? That is the same stress response as being attacked by a bear.
Yeah.
Body doesn't know the difference. And so now where does it go? Well, by continually complaining and by continually alerting other people to the unpleasantness around us, we are carrying out something I believe is like wired into our DNA as a tribal species. Like we are alerting other people to danger is where it comes from. But the danger is just, hey, don't go to this restaurant. I found a hair in my food there, you know?
It's so funny whenever it's so true, because think of the things that make us so upset. And I think you really actually, you really hit on something I think very profound there, is how are you approaching things, right? It doesn't really matter what the thing is. It matters how you approach it. Are you approaching with a sense of lack, right? Mm-hmm. Are you approaching with a constant sense of negation? Because I tell you what, I quote you a lot, Dave, and
Thank you.
For many reasons. But one of my favorite Dave-isms, Dave once told me, he said, if you go out and you bump into a person, they're an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, chances are, hey, you met an asshole, right? But if you go in and someday you meet like 3, 4, maybe 5 assholes in a day, chances are you're the asshole.
You're the asshole,
and
right?
It's so true, because think about that. Think about what that is, right? We're saying the approach to everyone else is to see the worst in them.
Right.
And I love that when you say, how are you approaching things? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter what it is, if you're instilling those values of how to approach something. And that is exactly, it's what I do. It's not what I say. I can say, be honest and truthful and brave. But if I'm approaching everything and I'm assuming people have the worst in mind, and I'm always acting out of lack and fear, I'm teaching them that. And they'll be, and I like how you mentioned your friend saying he'll absorb it, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's the kind of the key word is absorb.
Absorb, yeah.
Isn't it?
It really is.
And we absorb so much unconsciously. We don't even know it. And I think all of us remember growing up, and we were told by our parents, it's, you should, what you put in your mind, right, is junk in, junk out. And I'm like, right. No, I just like watching this or playing this or doing this or that, and I can make good decisions. But the reality is, everything does affect us. And so having that in mind going forward, yeah, I think learning those approaches and having someone there to coach me along, mm-hmm. I can see that being really valuable, because a really good book that I read about the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. Of course, I'm really into this relationship we have with ourselves, and is Strangers to Ourselves by Timothy Wilson. And he talks about how it's really hard to get to know yourself. And in fact, sometimes you need someone from outside of you to tell you, wait a minute, no, that's not true. Right. Hey, I'll tell you everything about me. And it's like, okay, you got quite a few of those things right. But based off of your behaviors, what does that really say about who you are?
Right.
And if you really know yourself. Actually, we had Devalvi said, know thyself. And you're absolutely right, Shakespeare. And we've known this for a long time. It is important to have that self-knowledge, but that's another reason why it's so good to have a coach.
Yeah, definitely. And like what we were talking about, like the characteristic of honesty earlier, right? If I've seen this happen, parents like honesty, don't lie to me, tell the truth, all that kind of stuff. You got to be honest and an upright citizen, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then they'll go like to a restaurant where it's like, kids under 8 eat for free. I know you're 9, but we're going to pretend you're 8. to save what, $12 at the all you can eat buffet, right? So
Yeah.
honesty is vitally important unless you want to save $12,
Right.
you know?
Right. Then throw it out the window.
And so what's going on there is the parent thinks that they're being wise. They think they're being sharp with money, right? But what's actually going on, the parent has a conflicting belief. I want my kid to be honest. I value honesty. I'm being dishonest in front of them. I'm modeling that. And what I'm telling you then, or what I'm showing you, is that it's important to be honest unless you decide it's not, right? And so everything happens in a state of flux, and there's no congruency to it. It's like, and so when I talk about this internal code, because we all have one, we have something that is guiding us, right? And I'm going to talk in detail about that on the workshop. And I do need to tell you, I have a hard stop in about 10 minutes, so we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, all good.
There's this incongruency there, and if we go back and uncritically observe ourselves and see, where am I living up to what I say I believe, and where am I actually saying that I believe something but acting something differently, because what I act reflects what I actually believe, right? It becomes a pretty simple matter to just write all that stuff down. And if you can separate your ego from it, ego in the sense of like justifying stuff, right? If you can just be uncritical, unjudgmental about it, and just look at it as pure fact, you'll see what's actually going on in your mind. And if you look at how you're feeling, like, how often are you feeling like somebody's being an asshole to you? How often are you feeling like someone is taking advantage of you? How often are you feeling like you did something and people appreciated you? How often do you feel like, you're contributing something? And when you can look at those things and see them, you see what your internal code, the actual destination that's programmed into your GPS, not where you kind of think you want to go, but what's actually programmed into the automatic pilot on the airplane, what's actually plugged into the thermostat, right? These cybernetic devices that recalibrate and put you back on course when you make a deviation from it. When you see that, then you can just measure one against the other, right? And you can rewrite your own code. That's the easy part. The hard part is installing the software, right? And which one of the reasons that I love having these conversations with you is because we're both familiar with breath work. We're both familiar with meditation. We're both familiar with going into that place that is undescribable, right? Of going into that place where we breathe ourselves into a state of I'm just awareness, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if we take away all the stuff that we do, we take away the physical body, we take away all the beliefs that we have, and we get down to just our pure consciousness, our I amness, right?
Yeah.
You've heard me talk about Neville Goddard before. And like the approach that Neville had toward the Christian Bible and the Old and New Testaments both. God's name is I am.
Mm-hmm.
I am. My awareness is God. Right. So I can, if I had total amnesia, I could forget who I was. I could forget who you are. I could forget everything about my life. I would still know that I am. And so we go into these places with our breath work and our meditation where we're able to consciously, intentionally get there. When we get there, as luck would have it, we tend to be in a theta brainwave state. And it's at that point we have reverted to being our first 7 years of life. And we can use that to our advantage to download information much faster. So we're not trying to force ourselves to do something differently. We're changing the destination in the GPS, right? Yeah. GPS keeps rerouting me. Why? It's because you put in the wrong destination, right? Change the destination and it will guide you smoothly and perfectly. Then it's not a matter of effort anymore. It's not a matter of willpower anymore. It's not a matter of forcing things anymore. It just becomes who I am, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the story of the three disciples, right, on the mountain, and one said, my master is so powerful, he only eats one time a day. Wow. And the next one says, well, my master is so powerful, he only eats one time a week. Wow, that's amazing. And then the last one said, well, my master is so powerful, he eats anytime he wants.
Right.
Right. And that's like, just think about that. When you're that in alignment with where you're going and what you want to do, it's not forcing it. It's not having to be crowbarred into something. It's just a natural thing and it's oftentimes really difficult to formulate that, and that's why I think it's so awesome that you're giving this kind of coaching. So
Thank
I
you.
want to thank
And well, if, to that point, to bring it back around and apply what you just said to a parenting type perspective, by doing this kind of work and by recognizing that there is an internal code, there is something in me that drives me, that guides me, that makes my decisions for me subconsciously, right? I mean, like in your language of breath course, you talk a lot about the interrelationship between subconscious and conscious mind, which actually is all one thing. We just have to,
that's the craziest part about it. Yeah.
Well, and it's just like the human body, right? My pinky finger and my elbow are all one thing.
All me. Yeah.
So when we recognize that this thing is what guides us, and that we can access this state like I'm talking about and reprogram it quite quickly and quite effectively, compared to like trying to willpower my way through it.
Yeah.
It restores our power to us. And yes. I believe that the breath is the connection between our physical experience and our subconscious experience, right? And so if I want my son to model a particular behavior or a particular set of values or whatever that I'm not exhibiting, then I know how to go in and fix it.
Yeah.
Once you've done enough of that kind of stuff, it no longer becomes a problem when something pops up, because you have prepared a response in advance to any given situation rather than having something happen and you react to it. It's like you are orchestrating your life rather than letting life happen to you and then you react to it, right? Animals react, humans respond.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Is breath work something that you offer in your coaching?
Yes, in the Advancing Man, there's like a whole breathwork section in there, because I think that it's really important to be able to capitalize on that, because there's the meditative aspect that we just talked about, and then there's all the physical benefits and the circulatory stuff, immune system, pH levels, all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. I don't think you can maximize yourself if you're not practicing some sort of breath work.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I like to tell people is that whether they like it or not, their breathing is influencing every aspect of their experience,
Well, sure. And like so, early on when I would do workshops, I would ask this, like even when I was doing kettlebell stuff, right? And when I was doing strength related workshops, and we would talk about breathing to enhance performance or whatever, I'd be like, who can tell me what the most important thing you're going to do today is? And they would spit out laundry lists of answers, practice my kettlebell swing, get my hip hinge right, brace my abs, whatever, right? And I'm like, no, the most important thing that you're going to do today is breathe. And if you don't believe me, take about 45 minutes and don't do it.
Yeah, just see what happens.
Right? Yeah. Right. Just play it out, see what happens. Because I guarantee you that within a matter of just a few minutes, it will suddenly become the single most important thing in existence when it's taken away from you.
Exactly. And learning the importance of how each breath influences our nervous system, our conscious, thinking, our ability to think critically and creatively. I as a parent now more than ever before,
right?
Because I've had my step on the Lego moment that everyone talks about. I've had my, did you really have to do it like that, son? Or did you really have to, like, how could you mess this up any more type of things? And I don't want to be the belittling, father, right. You're so dumb and so, but those are the instincts, right?
Right.
It's learning how to use breath to say, okay, calm down, Jesse. You want to be a good dad.
Yeah.
That I can only, yeah. So one, before we get out of here, I know you got a hard stop. Where can everybody find you? And then afterwards, send me something I can copy and paste into the description box below so they can click on it or whatever. After we talk, where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you? And
all of my social medias are either my name, Dave Whitley, or my stage name, Iron Tamer. So I'm pretty much on every one of those platforms. Just go look up Iron Tamer. You'll find me. It'll be a guy that looks just like me. The upcoming workshop that I'm doing is at advancingmanproject.com. That is Tuesday, the 24th. So it's early next week. It's going to be about 2 or 3 hours long. It's the 24th. It is 2 p.m. Central. We're going to go live. I welcome everyone to come join us. We're going to talk about deep dives into everything that we were just going over, and how to apply not only the breath work. There'll be less breath work talk and more like reprogramming the mind and becoming that man on that workshop. And that is at advancingmanproject.com. And the last thing last little story anecdote that I want to throw out before we go is this is how I approach this. I want to make things as natural as possible. I want to make things as easy to do as possible. I'm not about making things harder than they have to be. And there's a popular motivational speaker that I have seen that uses this story. He talks about this guy wanted to be successful, and he goes and he finds this guru, and the guru says, meet me at the beach at dawn. He takes him out in the water. He shoves his head underwater, holds him down, damn near drowns the guy. When he lets him up, the guy, coughing up, sardines and stuff. When he finally recovers, he says, why the hell did you do that? And he says, when you want to be a success as badly as you wanted to breathe, then you'll be a success. I'm just going to call bullshit on the whole thing. I'm going to say this. When your desire to be successful, by whatever definition you measure that, is as natural to you as breathing is, then you are a success. Like that. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Make it as natural as breathing. Let it just be a part of you, that every thought that you have is an inhale of good and an exhale of advancement. Be great.
Well, hey, thanks so much.
Appreciate you, brother,
joining us. And thanks everybody for all your questions and comments. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your comments and questions, but thank you so much, my friends. And of course, check out here in a little bit, we'll have the links below, but check out the advancingmanproject.com and Iron Tamer David Whitley. Guys, have a great weekend, and don't forget to go out there and be kind to one another.